Good morning, everyone. Let me call this meeting to order. I'm Margaret Hinkle. It's my privilege to chair the Post Commission. And to members of the public, we are grateful for the fact that you have joined us at this meeting. We will proceed according to our agenda, which has been published. And I think with that, let me begin by determining who among the commissioners is in attendance. Commissioner Bluestone.
Good afternoon, I'm here.
Commissioner Calderon.
Afternoon, present everyone.
Commissioner Sherry.
Present. Good afternoon.
Commissioner Ellison.
Present. Good afternoon.
Commissioner Luma.
Good afternoon, present.
Commissioner West.
Good afternoon, present.
And Commissioner Wynn.
Present. Good afternoon.
We have a quorum in attendance. Commissioner Kezerossian is not in attendance today. And I think with that, let me ask for a motion to approve the minutes of our December 13th, 2022 meeting. Is there such a motion?
I'll make
The motion.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion? Thank you, Commissioner Ellison. And let me call for a vote. Commissioner Bluestone,
Approve.
Commissioner Calderon,
Approve, yes.
Commissioner Sherry,
Yes.
Commissioner Ellison. I think he's actually second.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
Commissioner Luma,
Yes.
Commissioner West,
Yes.
Commissioner Wynn,
Yes.
and I also approve. Let me now call for a motion to approve the minutes of the January 12th, 2023 meeting. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Luma. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Wynn, thank you. Commissioner Bluestone,
Approve.
Commissioner Calderon,
Approve,
Commissioner Sherry,
Yes.
Commissioner Ellison,
Yes.
Commissioner Luma,
Yes.
Commissioner West,
Approved.
Commissioner Wynn,
Yes.
and I also approve. The minutes are unanimously approved. Let me now turn to the Executive Director report and turn to our Executive Director, Enrique Zuniga.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I will share my screen in a minute and walk you through a PowerPoint presentation with a summary of the activities of the last month. I will be giving you an update on the project of the disciplinary records, including some anticipated milestones. I will give you an update on the certification activities, as well as, and I will be asking for approval to publish a list of not certified individuals. And I will also close with a staffing update, a brief mention of our annual report as well. So at the beginning of this month, we went back to all chiefs asking for an update and validation of certain disciplinary records. I've included that letter in the packet. The letter, detailed instructions for that submission and a submission template are also available on our website, and they were deployed at the beginning of this month as well. We have deployed a new template that we believe is greatly going to ensure data integrity and enhanced reporting. And I should mention that we continue to get questions about the complaints and incidents that are reportable to Post. I believe that we should provide additional guidance. And my goal is to bring to you, perhaps for next meeting, a document that further clarifies some of the clarifications that we've done in the past, but articulates additional examples of information of the questions that we have got. And I'll give you one good example. It doesn't happen often, but let me say that we met with a large agency recently. They received a complaint which included everybody with a last name that started with the letter H. And because of the 2 business day requirement, the agency staff felt that they needed to submit a complaint attributable to every officer in the ranks with a last name that started with H. I would argue that in such case, that is not yet a complaint, and some due diligence was indeed necessary to ascertain the credibility of that complaint. And admittedly, given the large agency in this case, it may sometimes take more than 2 days. So I don't want to create the impression that this happens often, but instances like these have the potential to introduce concerns relative to data integrity. And again, my goal is that we come back at the next commission meeting with a document to discuss more of what we mean by complaints that are not reportable to post. Of course, that they meet the requirements of the current regulations, the 2 business day requirement. They address what we talked about in the past about an informal resolution process, as well as I mentioned before, when a complaint is indeed a complaint. Let me give you a snapshot of the disciplinary records that we received since last year. As you can see from this chart, about 1/3 of the complaints and records that the Post received as of last year were sustained complaints. Those 12,000 records there. These are instances that we are currently validating. We intend to make public as it's our mission. And this is also something that we're working very hard to make sure that we're validating. There's a similar breakdown in the rest of the categories. About a quarter of the other categories are distributed in the not sustained or founded or exonerated complaints. There's also about 1,126 complaints that at the time were pending, and that represents about 3% of the total complaints. And the point here is that there will be a variability at any given point of complaints that are submitted relative to those that are being investigated or are being disposed of. In all, we're talking about 40,000 or so records that we've been analyzing and managing. Per the regulations that we will be discussing later in the meeting, the public database will include only the sustained complaints and some additional aggregate metrics relative to the other categories, but we can be aggregating those by rank, by department, or of course by state, like I just did here. The definitions we've been using, those are definitions stated here at the bottom of the slide, which is something that is widely used by departments. So as I mentioned, this is the broad timeline for the disciplinary records project. We ask departments to submit validated data on March 15. There, we can anticipate that there may be a request, a couple of requests for an extension. We feel that we have a much better template this time around and a good migration tool compared to last time. And but that might still take at least a couple of months, a month or thereabouts, to migrate and aggregate all the data and conduct some additional quality assurance. So what we believe is that we can be perhaps in a good position to sometime in the summer of this year to publish a big part of those disciplinary records, as I articulated in the earlier slide, subject to meeting the milestones described herein. I should also mention that we have been working very hard to deploy a portal for submitting complaints into our permanent system, the Salesforce software solution. And when we deploy that system, the priority now is to deploy that system for the certification process, but we will have the capabilities to also start accepting complaints in that portal, and we can project a fall of this year for that portal to be operational. Of course, we will have to train and answer questions to all agencies submitting their complaints to us. Let me move on to a certification part of my report. These are the current numbers as represented in this chart. We have, as commissioners know, we have already published the list of certified officers A through H that now stands as of February 10. It stands at 8,277 individuals. 235 are conditionally certified. 313 are not certified, and I will be further breaking down that number in the next slide. And the total number of new certifications stands at 1,218. These numbers fluctuate from month to month, of course, but these are the numbers as of February 10th. The not certified individuals are broken down here. We have, these are all individuals who have not been certified. As I mentioned, actually, at the last commission meeting, we are proposing that we next publish the list of not certified individuals that fall in the categories that I'm showing in the slide here. Those that are have resigned or retired since they were first submitted. I would note that many of those, or all of those in that category may have done so in good standing, but they have not complied with the requirements for certification, and thus we cannot certify them. There are those that may have needed to attend or attended and failed the MPTC Bridge Academy training, and that's represented by that figure here of 57 of individuals. And there is a last category that we aggregate and call disciplinary matter, but these are individuals that may have been terminated, suspended, perhaps resigned or retired to avoid discipline. And in 2 instances, people who are listed in the National Decertification Index. So our recommendation is that we get approval from you commissioners to publish the list of those 140 individuals in those 3 categories as outlined here. There's a case to be made that if you so chose, we could also publish the list of those with an excuse leave. And I can tell you the reasons for doing that, and the reason for doing that, or the reason not to do that. The reason to publish that is that it would certainly create a very strong incentive for individuals who are currently on that excuse list to notify Post and the MPTC about their return to active duty as soon as they, or when they expect to do that. I have to mention that we have struggled with that update from individuals or agencies in the past, meaning sometimes they return to duty and they alert us of that later than that. We find out through the MPTC, for example. So that would be one reason to publish this list. The reason not to publish is that it could perhaps generate the wrong or unintended impression that these individuals are lacking compliance. And the reality is that the vast majority of them, as far as we know, are not in compliance with the requirements of software certification because through no fault of their own, because they are indeed on an excuse leave. So at this point, I would be happy to get any feedback from commissioners or questions about that. But and I see I already have a couple of those. Commissioner Bluestone, I think you raise your hand first.
Thank you. I think I'm in agreement with everything that you're saying here. The question that I have is, when you look at these categorizations of individuals who have not been certified, I'm wondering when they are published, will they be posted based on this categorization system that you have here in these 4 categories?
Yes, Commissioner, that was our intention and assumption. We could, of course, get any feedback from commissioners, but we would roll up the 4th category and just put it as a disciplinary matter. But we do have again, the details that are highlighted under it. It may be, it is in the public interest, and it's a matter of a great public interest. I would submit to you as to who may fall in that subcategory. But we would, our plan was to also publish the category, the second and third categories, and simply say, as we are stating in the chart here.
So I think if that's the case, my suggestion would be to consider maybe publishing some subcategories within these groups, because when I look at this, I think there is a difference between someone who, for example, failed the MPTC training versus someone who didn't attend and was absent from the training. And likewise, a difference between someone who is suspended on a disciplinary matter versus someone who's been terminated. And it might help to just consider whether that would be more accurate to make those subcategorizations.
Yeah, we can. We have access to that information, Commissioner, and you know, it would in some instances, in many instances, perhaps it would be to the benefit of everybody.
Thank you.
Commissioner Luma, you had another question?
Yeah, it was similar feedback. I was just looking to see if there was going to be a further breakdown of the categories, the same as Commissioner Bluestone. You know, I think some of these are nuanced, and people just need to know, particularly whether, I think more so with the disciplinary matter, I'm in agreement. There's a difference between terminated and suspended. There are many reasons people can be suspended, and I think that's a difference from being terminated. And the same, I think, whether resigned or retired, I think we need to, and for the category 2, is it going to indicate that that those individuals are in good standing, or is that just for the purposes of this presentation?
It will include, it's for both, Commissioner. So we can include that, in fact, that's the case. They retire or resign in good standing. And by the way, we know that they either resign in good standing or retired, and there's no issues. So we could certainly make that subcategory clear.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Ellison.
Yes, sir. Just to kind of a follow-up on Commissioner Bluestone's question, on the 57 that are MPTC training, is there a deadline for those individuals to come into compliance? And then I have a follow-up. I have another question for you, but.
The answer is no, Commissioner. The deadline has passed. There was a deadline for A through H, and the only recourse that these individuals have at this point is to attend a full-time academy. And at that juncture, when they finish, then they would be certified. I should note, Commissioner, that there's a deadline for those I through P, the next set of individuals who need to attend the Bridge Academy. I believe that's coming up. It's April. And that's also important for the public to know. Did you have a follow-up?
You just answered it, anticipating it, because I was going to ask you, was there a deadline for the certification for the other ones, but you just answered it in your follow-up. Thank you.
Yep. I see Commissioner Nguyen was the next one, Commissioner, to raise your hand.
Thank you. Most of my questions were answered by your responses to the previous questions. I guess I'm just curious as to the purpose of publishing resigned or retired in good standing at all. I mean, we're essentially talking about private citizens.
Yeah, that's up to you, commissioners. In our draft regulations, there's a section that Randy can point us to, that when an officer retires or resigns, that we just keep the name and the date of that individual's, end of duty. There's a question. There's a good question that you bring up that follows your question, rather, Commissioner, which is for how long? If we publish them, then for how long? Maybe there's a period of time that's incumbent because it's recent, but after a while, there's clearly a waning case for that. So they are currently in our records because they were submitted as part of the roster back in June. Because we have been managing a large set of data that fluctuates from time to time. we now see that somebody has either retired or resigned, and we have to update that. So that's why we find ourselves in this situation. Commissioner Calderon, you look like you wanted to also ask a question, or perhaps agree with Commissioner Quinn.
Please, my first was the same as Chief Wynn on number 2, resigned or retired. So I agree with him and I appreciate your answer. But the more important piece is one that I know I've talked about in the past, or that is of grave concern to the rank and file men and women on the street. Section 4, the disciplinary matter. Is there going to be a subsection or something that identifies anything that might be on appeal? Or is it just what you see there?
No, Commissioner, it will, if it's under review or if it's appeal, we would note it. And our draft regulations, again, which we will be discussing soon, anticipate that those that have recourse or are undergoing some kind of appeal process, that we would also note it.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Commissioner Ellison, do you have a follow-up?
Just a quick follow-up on Commissioner Wynn's. So those resigned or retired at some point, if they're not looking to be recertified, would those be purged from the system, or would they just stay there in entirety?
It's a good question. I don't have an immediate answer. I think there's a good case to eventually, after some period of time, to eliminate them from the list. There's a potential for individuals who retired to come back and do details for another department or seasonally. And so that points in the direction of keeping them on the list. We've taken the position and everybody agrees that they need certification also to be doing details. And that's why, it's not necessarily somebody retiring that is a total finality again. But we can decide, you can decide, commissioners, as to whether after a year or less, whatever the case may be, that we eliminate them from the list.
Thank you.
Commissioner West, did you have a question?
Thank you, Enrique. Just going back to the first category, excused leave, and I understood that you were sort of balancing between putting them on the list because that might inspire them if they're off this excuse to notify us to come off the list. And my thought there is, if we don't include this, if we don't include that list, somebody looking at the list is going to then look for their name on the certified list and it won't be there either. And I wonder if by not including them, we just create more confusion. So I'm for including category 1 with the subcategories, and I don't know if anyone else has a view on this. That was just all I wanted to say.
Yep. Let's see, Commissioner Luma appeared next on the screen.
Yeah. So, when I look at categories 3 and 4, I know there's a possibility that somebody could fall into both of those categories, right? You could have failed MPTC training and also have a pending disciplinary matter. I'm just wondering, how are you capturing that data?
It's theoretically possible, but I don't know if off the top of my head if there's somebody like that.
Well, I just want to know if that's possible. Does one category supersede the other? Like, are you going to be double counting individuals if they happen to fall into both categories, or would they just fall into one category?
For the purposes of counting and the way we've been doing in our database, we identify them as one category. There's a second category, I suppose it would be in further notes, or we can further note it, but we wouldn't want to be creating lists that double count people.
Right. That's my I guess what I wanted to point out, just checking to see kind of how that would be managed.
Yeah. It would probably fall in either or. If you're falling in two categories, it would be either or, either one or the other. Commissioner Bluestone.
Thank you. I'm in support of Commissioner West's suggestion to include the officers who are on excused leave for the reasons that she cites. And I'm sort of thinking about the fact that this category of resigned or retired is really kind of one of these things is not like the others. Because I think in general, I would imagine most officers and most individuals in the community will perceive this as a list that has some negative connotation. So resigning or retiring in good standing does not fit in that categorization, in my opinion. And it also skews the numbers, depending on how many we publish. It's either 15% or 32% of the total number. So I think it is more supportive of law enforcement to just publish the list of individuals where there's been any categorization that is based on an action or an inaction rather than a retirement or resignation.
Commissioner, perhaps we could, if the rest of the commissioners agreed, we could list the category 2 as people where the commission took no action because we have taken no action. We were initially saying we're not certifying them, but maybe the better nomenclature would be that we never took action on them.
Enrique, I think Commissioner Calderon again has his hand in the air, and then I think I'd like to, I appreciate all of the comments, and I think it's about time that we make a decision whether or not to approve. So Commissioner Calderon first, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Commissioner West, and I apologize, one of the other commissioners that came on talking about excused leave, but I'm curious as to if we are going to publish under a title of excused leave, do I understand that there's going to be subcategories with those topics, military, sick, injury, leave of absence? Do we intend on putting that online publicly? I'm unclear on, is that?
That may cut in the other way, unlike the other categories 3 and 4, that was good to perhaps put further details on the subcategories. I argue that this one is not a good one to put further subcategories, Commissioner.
I agree. I agree.
Okay,
Sorry, Mr. Director. Yeah, that's what I was getting at, is that I would be extremely wary of putting an excused leave and then having a subtopic stating why that person is on leave. I don't think it's fair to the family of a military officer or a sick and injured officer to have their families at the leisure of possible retaliation, as rough as that sounds. But I don't think that any family should be exposed as to maybe someone that's serving their country being not at home. So I would hope that we're not going to put that out that way, but I appreciate it. Sounds like we're not going to, correct?
Yeah, I mean, we were initially on the mindset of, a roll-up, and based on the comments of categories 3 and 4, I think that's meritorious to ask further to publish further details. But I agree with you, Commissioner, that perhaps that's not the case for category 1.
I think Commissioner Calderon's suggestion makes sense.
Thank you. Appreciate the consideration, everybody.
Is there any other commissioner who has not been able to make a comment or ask a question? If not, my suggestion is that we, given the nature of our discussion, that we take up each category separately. Is there a motion to approve the publication of category number 1, but with no subsets? Is there such a motion?
I move to publish it.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Commissioner Bluestone?
Yes, I'll second.
I'm sorry, and now any further discussion? And then I'll call for a vote with regard to 1, but no categories, no subsets. Commissioner Bluestone, you approve. I believe you just seconded that, I think. Commissioner Calderon?
Yes.
Commissioner Sherry?
Yes.
Commissioner Ellison?
Yes.
Commissioner Luma?
Yes.
Commissioner West?
Yes.
Commissioner Wynn?
Yes.
And I also approve. It's unanimously approved. Now, with regard to category 2, is there a motion from any commissioner to publish that? I don't think I see any, and I'm having a little trouble with my screen.
I can stop sharing if you want to see the full screen, Chair.
Don't think there is such a motion. So we will not, the inference is there is no such approval with regard to category 2. Category 3, can we take 3 and 4 together, counselors? And that would be publication with subsets. Correct? Is there such a motion?
I move to publish it.
Is it? Thank you, Commissioner West. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Luma. Any further discussion? If not, let me call for the vote. Commissioner Bluestone,
I approve.
Commissioner Calderon,
No, I am against.
Commissioner Sherry,
Yes, I approve.
Commissioner Ellison,
Yes.
Commissioner Luma,
Yes.
Commissioner West,
Yes.
Commissioner Wynn,
Yes.
and I also approve. The motion is carried. And thank you. I think we can probably now go back, Enrique, to screen sharing and the remainder of your report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just need 1 minute. Okay, so I'll move on to the next. We already talked about this, essentially. Those under military sick or injury leave are supposed to notify post as soon as they return to full duty, and we'll coordinate with the MPTC to make sure that they are not inadvertently or willingly misrepresenting that. They'll have 90 days upon the return to service to complete the requirements for certification. I just want to briefly mention the annual report. As per the funding for, oh, you had a question, Commissioner Luma?
Yeah, just if you couldn't go back, how are they notified that they have 90 days to complete the requirements? Can you remind me of that again? Is it through their agency, or are we partaking the notification?
So we typically send the letters from the interim solution, the JIRA solution, were sent to agencies, and we ask agencies to distribute to those individuals. Our system, our current system, the one we're developing, is going to have the capability to notify the officer directly with the letters for certification, which is a significant enhancement, I might add, and notify also the agencies. But after the mass mailing that we did last, July, we've been notifying all of these one-offs, individually as well, with the officer typically. So
Thank you.
that's the current status. Okay, so as I was saying, the annual report, as part of the last year's funding, the legislature wrote that the report that post was required to report the following information, what you see on the screens here. We feel we have included all of that information as part of the draft annual report that you have in your packets. But I will mention that at this time, it may be too early to comment on the third bullet here on identifying patterns of unprofessional police conduct. Given the large data sets that we have, we feel that there is no comment in that regard at this time. It is clearly something that we will continue analyzing and reporting as we see fit. I will note that the report is due to the legislature before March 10th, and with the current draft and a little bit of time for production, we feel we will be clearly within that requirement. Just briefly on personnel, I want to welcome the following 3 individuals that joined us since our last meeting. Dina Wansi and Barnabas Oparaugo as senior certification specialists. They are hard training on the new permanent solution, the Salesforce solution. We also have Kerry Johnson as our records access officer joining our legal team, who's very busy doing a number of things, as you all know. We will be onboarding a digital communications coordinator and actually a hearings administrator very soon. And we are currently hiring for the deputy director of certification, a Salesforce administrator, and another product manager in the IT department. That leads me, commissioners, to the director of standards and the candidate that we have for ratification and appointment by you, the commission. We have with us, that's the end of my presentation, but let me stop sharing to tell you about the candidate that we have, the finalists that we have. I'll describe the process that we did
Enrique, if I could interrupt you, sorry, because Commissioner Ellison has had his hand in the air, and I just wonder if he has a question about anything that you addressed before you moved to discuss attorney.
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you for catching that. Just a quick question on the IT hire. Have we filled that position? Has that position been filled, I should say, in the IT? That was Maurice's old position.
Yeah, that position has been filled for a while. We have a CTO has been in place. There's a business analyst as well. We are hiring 2 more positions because there's a lot of activity in the IT department with our Salesforce platform and all the information that we require to public and whatnot.
Thank you.
Okay. So actually, I can see him on the screen. Mr. Matthew Landry is joining us. Like last time, commissioners, we conducted the search for the director of standards. I had the help of Chair Hinkle, Commissioner Kasarosian, Commissioner West, and General Counsel Ravitz. Based on the feedback provided by all, I am happy to present Matthew Landry to be appointed by the Commission for the statutory position of the Division of Standards. Mr. Landry counts with 20 years of experience in various capacities with the Commonwealth, the Appeals Court, and the U.S. Navy. Mr. Landry most recently served as Chief Legal Counsel for the Massachusetts Department of Transportation at the Department of Motor Vehicles. In that capacity, he has been part of the leadership team providing strategic direction, management and oversight on business operations, commercial transactions, employment, labor relations, litigation, and as well as regulatory and compliance matters. Prior to MassDOT, Mr. Landry spent 5 years at the Attorney General's office. His tenure there included working at the Medicaid Fraud Division, the Administrative Law Division, its Government Bureau, the Appeals Division's Criminal Bureau as well, on a number of different cases and capacities. From 2014 to 2015, Mr. Landry clerked for the Massachusetts Appeal Court, Associate Justice William Mead. And before that, Mr. Landry served as assistant to the clerk of the House of Representatives for 9 years. Mr. Landry served active duty in the United States Navy as an intelligence officer from April 2009 to May of 2010, and has also been a reserve intelligence officer with the U.S. Navy for 6 years. Mr. Landry obtained his Juris Doctor and graduated summa cum laude from Suffolk University Law School. He holds a master's in public affairs from UMass Boston and graduated from Hofstra University with a BA in political science. That's a brief summary of Mr. Landry's credentials. I can turn it over to Chair Hinkle if you want to say anything about the process we took.
Yes, thank you very much, Enrique. Let me mention that I was not familiar with Matt Landry before we interviewed the prospective candidates for the position. I was, however, part of the due diligence team. And the accolades that everybody I spoke with were extremely, extremely positive. I want to mention in particular that I spoke with the appeals court justice for whom Matt clerked after he finished Suffolk Law School. And that is Justice Mead, as Enrique mentioned a minute ago. Justice Mead stated that, among other things, former Supreme Judicial Court Justice John Graney, who taught Matt when Matt was at Suffolk Law School, had called him and mentioned that he had an absolutely extraordinary, very hardworking, intelligent, extremely impressive candidate for the appeals court clerkship that he was recommending. And this was before I think that Matt knew anything about this call. And then Commissioners, Appeals Court Justice Mead just mentioned that he has continued to work and to involve himself in Matt Landry's career, which he knows has been an extraordinarily accomplished career, and he had simply nothing but accolades to mention in his comments on his former law clerk. And that mirrored everything that I received from anybody that I spoke with. I think it would be also useful for you to hear from Commissioner West, whose knowledge of Matt comes not from having done due diligence, but from having worked with him in the Attorney General's office. Let me turn this over to her, excuse me, at this point for her comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, I actually did know Mr. Landry prior to this process. I had the real pleasure of working with Matt while he was at the Attorney General's office in the Criminal Bureau. And even though Matt was just one of more than 100 staff in the Bureau, the excellent quality of his work was conspicuously notable, and his work ethic was remarkable. I will make sure that everyone knows that in addition to the appellate work he did, Matt was specifically assigned to trial teams when there were complicated motions that needed a legal expert. I am truly delighted that Matt is interested in this position, and I am confident that he is the right person to lead the division.
Thank you very much, Commissioner West. Let me ask my fellow commissioners what questions they may have of the candidate. I know that each of you received a copy of his CV before our meeting, so I think you were aware from having looked at that of what his background has been. Does anybody have any questions? And I don't think I see any hands in the air. And I think with that, I would entertain a motion to ratify the selection of Matt Landry as our Director of the Division of Standards. Is there such a motion?
I move for that appointment, Your Honor.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it, man.
Thank you.
Second.
Any further questions? If not, let me call for a vote. Commissioner Bluestone,
I approve.
Commissioner Calderon,
Yes.
Commissioner Sherry,
I approve.
Commissioner Ellison,
Yes.
Commissioner Luma,
Yes.
Commissioner West,
Yes.
and Commissioner Wynn.
Yes.
I also approve. It's unanimously carried. And I think with that, let me turn this over for any comments that our new Director of the Division of Standards might wish to make at this time. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, commissioners, for that. I'm really very grateful, frankly honored for the opportunity to join the commission staff. I am frankly inspired to join this team because I believe that the work that we're doing is so important. And I come to this role as someone, like has been mentioned, that I've spent my career in public service, both in state government and also in the U.S. Navy. And I think the thing I want to take into this position is the knowledge of, having taken an oath myself to serve my community. I will make that a center point of the decisions and recommendations that I make in this role. I know we're at an important moment as the commission does the work that the statute and regulations charge us to do, and I'm excited to play a part in this. And I promise that having been appointed, that I'll do my best to apply the standards and the frameworks in a manner that is both consistent and fair to all involved. Thank you very much again for the appointment.
You're welcome. We look forward to continued communication and contact with you. And I think, let me, with that, move please to item number 4 on our agenda, the regulations update. I turn now to our general counsel, Randy Ravitz.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen. Okay, this is a presentation regarding 2 sets of regulations that are before the commission, which the commission has seen before. And the reason that I'm offering updates in the form of this presentation is because the commission has seen the drafts before, and the comments on the latest round of revisions have been provided to the commissioners. And because a member of the public reached out to say that they found it particularly helpful when the revisions were summarized and regulations were presented through PowerPoint presentations. So it's also an attempt to accommodate that. However, I do have and can show on the screen or discuss the drafts themselves at any point. But I thought I'd start with this presentation, which highlights the areas that I think are most significant in terms of the latest round of revisions. So just starting with the regulations regarding databases and the dissemination of information. I'll just go through the promulgation history by way of reminder. At the July 12th meeting of last year, there was a presentation on this general topic of the dissemination of information regarding law enforcement officers. Then a draft of these regulations was presented at the August 4th meeting. A revised draft was presented at the September 8th meeting. Another revised draft was presented and it was approved by the commission at the October 12th meeting. And then following public notice, a public hearing was held on December 6th, and written public comments were received, quite a few. Those public comments were summarized and discussed at the commission's December 13th meeting. Then a revised draft was presented at its January 12th meeting. And then now I'm presenting another revised draft at this February 16th meeting. And each round of revisions took into account any comments received from inside or outside the commission. Because there's been such discussion, both, again, among members of the commission team and members of the public regarding these regulations, we're not expecting to open up the discussion to members of the public at this meeting. And we do expect to ask for a vote today. Okay, first, as people will recall, there was a lot of discussion about the concept of a conclusion. And originally the draft had included the term conclusion, and then used that term. I see that there's a question from Commissioner Calderoni.
Thank you, Counsel. I apologize. I know you said we were going over the regulations here as the presentation. Didn't we just vote on what was going to be posted? Isn't that what the vote just was? I know we haven't actually voted on the regulations being approved by the commission, but as far as what's going to be public and not and how it's going to be disseminated, didn't we just do that?
The commission voted on publishing certain information at this point. But what we're asking for now would be a vote on the full body of regulations that have been drafted and put out for public comment and redrafted.
Okay. Okay, but the public portion of what we're posting, the pieces with the history, the military office, the appeals and such, we already voted on that, correct? Part of this regulation was already voted on? Because I mean, I voted no specifically because it seemed like we put the cart before the horse. I mean, the regulations are going to encompass what we actually post in the different databases, but we just voted on that already, correct?
What the vote, as I understand it, was to publish certain information really until the full database is up and running. So these regulations would govern a much more extensive permanent database. And they actually build in a provision that states that the commission will decide on a date when that full database is up and running, which gives us some time to deal with the technological complexities of it. But in the meantime, the way that we've been making information available to members of the public has been through the publication of sets of data each month.
Okay, so we're going to discuss even though we just passed some up until the regulations in a time frame that we're going to put forward, we're going to discuss them again as we go section by section. Do I have
Yes,
that correct? Yeah, okay. Okay, all right. Thank you, Counsel. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So there was a lot of discussion before about the definition of conclusion, and an earlier draft had used that term in a few different places as a way of establishing when a given certification matter or disciplinary matter would be publicized. And so this draft takes a different approach. It strikes that term.
Excuse me,
Yes.
Randy.
Yes.
I don't know. I just want to make sure it's not on your end of mine because it's coming in very choppy. I just want to know if it's something I need to do because you're breaking up on my end and it may be my connection. Just want to, if anyone else is experiencing that.
I'm not. He's clear to
Okay.
me, Larry.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's right. So rather than using that one term in a set of different contexts, this draft strikes that term from throughout the regulations and instead addresses the subject of when and how certain certification and disciplinary matters should become publicized through a set of provisions that are inserted in their proper context throughout the regulations. Now, specifically dealing with disciplinary matters, the latest draft aims to reflect a compromise between comments that were offered by different commissioners at the last commission meeting, as well as by members of the public. So what it would provide is that the fact that a matter is pending before the commission or a law enforcement agency will still not be made available to the general public in the public database. But if that body renders a final decision that's adverse to the officer, that decision will be made available to the general public in the public database at that point in time. But then if the commission has knowledge that the officer is challenging the decision before the commission or the Civil Service Commission or an arbitrator or a court, a notation of that fact that it's being challenged will be included. And in any event, the public database will include prominently displayed advisories about the possibility of challenges. And if an action or decision is then reversed or vacated, that original action or decision will no longer be available to the general public in the public database. So an earlier version had basically provided that the earlier decision and the later decision would both be included. This would provide that if the earlier one has been reversed or vacated, the earlier one is then removed. And in any event, the commissioners would be able to vote to make a matter unavailable to the general public if they find that necessary. Now then, moving on to the treatment of certification matters. Yes, Commissioner Calderoni.
I'm sorry, Counselor, if I'm asking you the same thing. So again, I voted no on that because we put that out. And now if I understand, are we going to vote again on this, you're saying? Or no?
Well, this would be a vote on a set of provisions that would go into the Code of Massachusetts regulations and that would govern the commission's permanent and very extensive database going forward. So not just one set of information that we're publishing now, but something more permanent, something that's in the form of regulations that has the force of law. Is that answering your question?
I think so, because my concern is the piece of the appeal, as you saw, I voted no earlier, and I think it's unfair, and it's unfair to the office's health and safety and the mental well-being that I know we're all concerned with, that we constantly talk about, to have a public database that says that an officer is terminated, suspended, et cetera, but it's actually in the course of some type of appeal. And then if it gets overturned, we as a commission would then take that information out. But up until then, that's public information that I know that no juror or hopefully anyone that's rendering a decision on a case of appeal would read. But we have had officers that are unfairly tried in the general public view of newspapers and medias that then become exonerated and they're not guilty. So I'm extremely worried, as you could hear, and did vote no against the other one, because I don't think that's a fair case. And I know I'm one commissioner, but if somebody's on an appeal, then maybe it's something that shouldn't be in a public database. Okay, I understand we're going to do it. Go ahead, Chair.
If I could just comment, Commissioner Calderon, I'm not entirely sure that I'm understanding the questions that you're raising. The regulations are, of course, much broader than what we addressed earlier during our meeting. But without specifically, once a matter has been, somebody has been convicted in a court, that is a public record. And the fact that somebody takes an appeal is, of course, also a public record. So I'm having a little bit of difficulty understanding the thrust of the particular question that you're raising right now. In addition, I think, and this is something I probably would turn to our general counsel on, but our enabling statute makes reference also to something with regard to what is public, with regard to when a matter is something that we must address. And that takes up the question of an appeal. But I really want to emphasize that the moment somebody is convicted in a court of law, that is generally something which is available to the public. In Massachusetts.
Madam Chair, I agree with you there. In a court of law, absolutely. But a suspension rendered down by the Boston Police Department is something that's administered by the police commissioner. It's not a court of law. So that's the appeal that I was concerned with. Maybe I'm not interpreting it right, and that's why I'm asking all these questions.
But I think we have been pretty careful, Commissioner Calderon, to distinguish among those nouns, so to speak, as we have addressed those issues. And we will continue to be exceedingly careful and mindful of all due process issues when we take up such things as suspensions, differently from something relating to a conviction. We have to be careful of what the noun is that we're talking about.
I agree. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So as far as the treatment of certification matters, and this also addresses some of the comments that were made earlier, this latest draft would provide that a certification status that's being challenged, or that still could be challenged within the commission, will be listed as under review. The draft would also provide for the inclusion of the dates on which the officer in Massachusetts was first certified and was most recently certified and ceased being certified. Now, a possibility would be to add, and the reason why the officer ceased being certified, or that detail could continue to be omitted. So if commissioners have reactions to that, I could stop and entertain those. If not, I'll move on. This draft also provides for the exclusion of information concerning any individual who is no longer serving as an officer, but has not been decertified, other than the individual's last name, last employing law enforcement agency, and dates of service. So this goes to what the executive director mentioned earlier, that if somebody's no longer serving, only some basic information about them would be included. But again, an alternative would be to only provide that information for somebody who ceased serving within the past 5 years. by adding language like who ceased serving as an officer more than 5 years previously, instead of just who is no longer serving as an officer. So again, there too, there's nothing required about the figure of 5 years. It could be a different length of time, but if any commissioners have reactions to that, I'd be interested to hear them. I see Commissioner Nguyen has raised his hand.
Mike, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I'm curious about the 5 years because it seems to me it would make more sense that it would correspond with their current certification. They're going to come up for recertification within a period of 3 years. If they've retired in the interim, it should lapse at the same time their certification lapses.
Okay, so in other words, the way it's drafted now, if somebody's no longer serving, that basic information stays in forever. The alternative that I offered, which is just a proposal, would basically say that basic information stays in for 5 years after they're done serving, and then it can come out. But Commissioner, I'm wondering if you would prefer that it provide for no information to be included once an officer stops serving. Is that your preference?
Going back to my comments prior to our previous vote, I'm concerned that we're now talking about information for a former officer who at this point is now a private citizen and kind of outside of our purview. And at some period within 3 years, they would have come up for recertification anyway, and they simply wouldn't have received it. And so rather than continue to publish it for potentially an additional 2 years after the certification naturally lapsed, it should just expire and our records should expire with them.
Okay, so would you prefer that their information is removed at the moment that they stop serving, or 3 years after they've stopped serving, or some other formula?
I don't know that I have a position on that one way or the other, because we kind of said we're gonna have some information about retirees. I would just suggest that this section, your alternative section, read until their next potential recertification.
Right. It could say until 3 years after their last certification. And then regardless of whether we have, it would account for situations where we might not have the information that the person has left service or might not get it right away. Would that be preferable?
That would make more sense.
Okay. Okay. Are there any more comments on that? Otherwise, I can move on. Okay. Next, based on discussion at the last commission meeting, which in turn was based in part on some public comments, the following sections have been struck from this set of regulations, the 2 sections dealing with public records requests. So now the regulations focus on databases and do not get into the handling of public records requests. And then finally, there are a couple of non-substantive corrections, and I apologize for not catching these sooner. One is a typo. It's a place where it says 10, it should say 10. And then if the commission is going to strike the sections on public records requests, then the definition of the term requester should also be struck because it's no longer used. Now, are there any other questions that I can entertain?
I don't think I see, I'm sorry, Commissioner West.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, this is the 7th time we've looked at this regulation, so I do think it's time, and I'm ready to vote on it. But I want to extend my appreciation to the General Counsel. This has been an onerous process, but a very, very important regulation. Thank you.
And I would second that, and also comment that I think we have not only been benefited by the thoughts of our fellow commissioners, but also by the members of the public who have commented on the proposed regulations. And I think with that, is there a motion to approve the regulations with the modification, I think, that Commissioner Wynn and our general counsel have agreed on? Is there such a motion?
I'll make that motion to approve it.
Is there a second to the motion?
I second it.
Is there any further discussion? If not, let me call for a vote. Commissioner Bluestone,
I approve.
Commissioner Calderon,
No, I'm against.
Commissioner Sherry,
yes,
Commissioner Ellison,
Yes.
Commissioner Luma,
Yes,
Commissioner West,
Yes,
Mr. Wynn,
Yes,
and I also approve. So the motion is carried. And I think with that, let me turn again to you, General Counsel, and the proposed regulations regarding regulatory action and advisory opinions, which is item number 4B on our agenda.
Thank you. Okay. These proposed regulations were presented previously at a commission meeting, 2 meetings ago. And or 2 or 3 meetings ago, but I will summarize them since they have already been presented and just highlight 2 small revisions that have been made since the last time that they were presented. So by way of reminder, they are intended to satisfy the statutory requirement imposed on all agencies to promulgate regulations concerning petitions from members of the public for regulatory action by the agency, and also to prescribe procedures for the agency to exercise its power to issue an advisory ruling. Both of those mechanisms are described in Chapter 30A, the Administrative Procedures Act. And these regulations list steps that a petitioner should take, which would facilitate the processing of the petition. It does not require the petitioner to take those steps. So in other words, somebody could still simply send us an email saying that they would like the commission to take certain actions. This certainly does not preclude that. It just lists some things that will make it easier to process their application, their petition, and also provides an incentive to take those steps by providing that where a petitioner does take those steps, the commission in turn will take certain steps in terms of processing the petition and providing notification. Now, with respect to petitions for regulations, they include provisions concerning hearings on proposed regulations and revisions following hearings. And with respect to petitions for advisory opinions, they include certain provisions regarding the procedures for approval, publication, the effect of opinions, and the ability of people to rely on them. And with respect to both types of petitions, they include provisions regarding administrative matters, non-substantive corrections by the staff after adoption, and communicating through any counsel that petitioners may have. Obviously, the endnotes that I use when presenting would not appear in any filed version. And then there are just 2 revisions that have been made since the last draft was presented. And those were included in light of comments made at commission meetings in relation to other draft regulations about affording commissioners the opportunity to respond to decisions made by a single person. And so this would provide that petitions for regulatory action or advisory opinions would be provided to the chair and all other commissioners, and that the subject of the petition would be placed on a meeting agenda at the direction of the chair or 4 commissioners. And where does the 4 commissioners come from? That's borrowed from the provision stating that the commission can hold a meeting in addition to the regular monthly meetings at the direction of the chair or on the request of 4 commissioners. So it's just borrowed from that provision of the statute. And if there are any questions, I can entertain them.
Thank you again, Randy. I don't think I see any hands in the air. Thank you for your good work. Thank you to the members of the public and the other commissioners who have commented on these proposed regulations. Let me ask for a motion to adopt them. Is there such a motion?
I move to adopt the regulations.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Any further comment? If not, let me call for a vote. Commissioner Bluestone, please.
I approve.
Commissioner Calderon,
Yes.
Commissioner Sherry,
Yes.
Commissioner Ellison,
Approved.
Commissioner Luma,
Yes.
Commissioner West,
Approved.
Mr. Wynn.
Yes.
I also approve. This motion is unanimously carried. And let me move on now to item number 5 on our agenda, which is a finance update from our Chief Financial Officer, Eric Rebello-Pradas, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The commissioners' packets include the two financial tables, which I will get to in just a moment, and then also a updated organizational chart for FY24, and that is for your that's for your reference. Getting over to the goal for this particular part of the meeting is really to have the commissioners, have you vote on the budget number that we're submitting for FY24, that we have submitted, I should say, to A&F. As you know, the governor's budget will be filed on March 1st of next month. So therefore, we have been working very closely with A&F to get a number that we both can agree on to include within the governor's budget. So that number, as I'm going to show you in a moment, is 9.1 million for FY24. And I'm going to share my screen real quick and just go through the highlight some of the numbers here. Okay, can everyone see that?
No, Eric.
Oh,
Oh.
Sorry, forgot to hit the button. All right, here we go.
Yes.
All right, everyone can see that, I'm assuming?
Yes.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much. So this chart here, and this is one that we had shown something similar last month during the January 12th commission meeting. And this one basically shows our FY23 base of $5 million. That's what we were allocated in the budget for FY23. And then, of course, our FY24 maintenance number. Maintenance, these are just, this is jargon from A&F. Obviously, a maintenance budget is what they were looking for when they put together House 1. And a maintenance budget basically just means the same amount of goods and services that you're providing one fiscal year over the next without any increases. However, because we are a startup, that's a little bit different for Post. Post is still in growth method or growth mode. So of course, we are going to have some expansions within our what we call a maintenance budget. Just real quickly, I just wanted to show that $5 million base that you see down here, this really is just the allocation from FY23. It does not include the $2.9 million rollover, which we received from FY22, which, as you know, we were using to finance most of our our IT solution, which was embodied within Salesforce. And that still remains to be the case. And if you actually look at the next slide here, you can see this is the updated budgeted spending number, 8 million. This is inclusive of the 2.9 million that we were talking about before. And the reason I show both of these slides is so that you can see it's a little bit of a misperception, but if you look at last year, $5 million allocation to what we're asking for this year, which is 9.1, it looks like an 82% increase, but obviously that's not the case. This is only for A&F purposes, the way they do their budgeting. But if you look at apples to apples, you can clearly see that our budgetary number around $8 million for FY23, growth of to $9.1 million. Now you're looking at a growth of relatively 13% or about $1 million. So that $9.1 million is what we have submitted to A&F. We've been working with them on those numbers since the original submission back in late October, early November. Now, we do believe that this particular number we think this is the perfect number that we want to use for FY24. Now, it does include 5.3 million of that particular number is for payroll, and this includes an extra 10 FTEs, 10 staffers, and this would give us a total of 41 employees by the end of FY24. Right now, we are at, I believe it's, right now we're about 25 employees, and we are booked to get 31 by the end of this particular fiscal year, June 30th, over the next couple of months. This also includes about $900,000 for the new office space, which also includes equipment and furniture and moving expenses, IT equipment as well. And the new office space, although a lease has not been signed yet, we are right in the middle of doing the cost benefit analysis, or DCAM is actually in the middle of doing that. Once that is complete, we should be in the process of going into the lease mode, signing a lease, and we should be all set for a move-in of July 1st, or at least that is the tentative date. And then finally speaking, another major part of the 9.1 million is for IT. We're going to finish up the Salesforce project. This will also include some enhancements as well as possible additional applications that we will use. And then, of course, additional or continued maintenance and licensing for the Salesforce application. Now that 9.1, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, that $9.1 million number that you see on the bottom there that we have submitted, is that the final number that the governor will include in her budget on March 1st? We hope it is. But because we're working with A&F very closely, the numbers are supposed to stop this week. So they are still moving, and they might move a little bit over the weekend. So A&F does not want to give us a final decision on that number, whether or not they're going to include that particular figure. But we are hopeful that that will be the case. I will know more most likely by tomorrow afternoon, or maybe on Monday or Tuesday, as to what the final number will look like. So that hopefully we'll know about it before it comes out on March 1st. The budget usually goes to print about 2 weeks before it is published. Any questions on that? Yes, Commissioner Luma.
I just had a question. The reduction in contract employees, what does that account for between FY23 and 24?
So what we did there, that's actually a good question. What we did there is we were accounting for a IT contractor that we ended up for FY23 because we weren't sure if we were going to be able to hire someone as an employee full-time, or were we going to have to hire a contractor because they were going to have a special skill set that we wouldn't be able to get with a regular full-time employee. We thought we'd have to spend more money and actually go with a contractor. We actually found out that that was not the case. Right now, we were able to bring on we brought on a business analyst, and we are still hiring for a product manager and a Salesforce administrator, and we did not have to worry about putting that into a contractor, that form. We were able to bring that on. We believe we will be able to bring those on as a regular employee. So that $150,000 was basically moved from the contract employee up into employee compensation.
Thank you.
With that being said, Madam Chair, I believe if there were no other questions, if you wish to move forward with voting on the 9.1 million for the FY24 budget.
Thank you. And so may I ask for a motion to that effect? And I'm sorry, with the screen share, I'm having trouble seeing all of the commissioners.
I'm going to stop sharing in just 1 second here. There we go.
And again, my question is, before I ask that question, I'm just going to turn to Commissioner Ellison, who I know has been ably serving as our treasurer, and ask him if he wishes to make any comment on what has just been provided.
No, and first I want to thank Eric and his team for keeping me abreast of all of what's been going on. It's been quite an endeavor, and they're also their responsibility with the Commonwealth and the taxpayers' money. They're very diligent in that. So these numbers really reflect what they would need to operate sufficiently. Like you said, with the startup, and these numbers are increasing because of the need that has been presented. And it's been very responsible in their handling of it. So I just want to say thank them for that, and for keeping me abreast of what's going on so that I can keep my fellow commissioners informed as well.
Thank you very much. Is there a motion to approve the budget number of 9.1 million?
I will make that motion, Madam Chair. So
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion? Thank you, Commissioner Luma and Sherry. And with that, let me ask the commissioners for a vote. Commissioner Bluestone, please.
I approve.
Commissioner Calderon.
Approve, yes.
Commissioner Sherry.
I approve.
Commissioner Ellison.
yes.
Commissioner Luma.
Yes.
Commissioner West.
Yes.
Commissioner Wynn.
Yes.
And I also approve. And thank you very much, Eric, again, and Commissioner Ellison and the members of Eric's staff for all of their impressive work with regard to this information.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And I think with that, unless there are any other questions or comments from my fellow commissioners, I turn to item number 6 on our agenda. There are no matters known to me which were not anticipated by me as chair at the time of posting. And I would at this time move that we go into executive session in accordance with the portions of Chapter 30A of the general laws, that is section 21A5 and 21A7, combined with Chapter 60, section 8C2, that is in anticipation of discussion regarding the investigation of charges of criminal misconduct, and to the extent that they may be applicable, in anticipation of discussion regarding the initiation of preliminary inquiries and initial staff review related to the same, and regarding certain criminal offender record information. And I think with that, is there a motion to go into executive session?
I move to go.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Commissioner Bluestone,
Yes.
Mr. Calderon,
Yes.
Mr. Sherry,
Yes.
Mr. Ellison,
Yes.
Commissioner Luma,
Yes.
Commissioner West,
Yes.
Commissioner Wynn,
Yes.
and I also approve. And let me state, so the motion is unanimously carried by the commissioners in attendance. Let me state for members of the public, we will not be resuming any portion of the public meeting after our executive session. Thank you, members of the public, for attending today. And I think fellow commissioners and members of the staff who will be attending the executive session, we will take a 5-minute break before we go into our executive session. Any other questions or comments from anybody? Thank you.